that we have going on right now is that this is not a very smart way this does it, right? For one, it works on a timeline which is very rigid. It's every 30 seconds, every 60 seconds, every 1 minute, whatever that something is, right? The better approach would be to have this be done all at the same time as the other services do the updates. Let me explain that. One of the most expensive things you can do in Android is, second most expensive thing you can do in Android is fire up the radio, right? Use the radio. So our poll service definitely does that. It uses the radio, goes out to the world and checks the cloud, right? Now, it'd be fine if we were the only citizen on the phone, but we're not. There's Twitter, there's Facebook, there's LinkedIn, there's Yelp, other things that you have going on, Gmail, Gtalk, whatnot, right? All these services are running on your phone, as we saw yesterday. So if they all have their own sort of interval, that is not gonna work very well. That's why battery doesn't last too long, right? So better approach would be to have something else control this interval that's approximate, because we don't really care if it's every 15 minutes, right? We would rather have it be on about certain time span and be grouped with other services. So as opposed to the radio going, as opposed to everyone firing up the radio like this over timeline, right? We could have services group stuff and be quiet, and then they all go do the radio thing, then they go quiet, they all go do the radio thing, then go quiet, and so on, right? We'd rather have that than have gazillion like little things like that. Make sense? So that's what we're trying to accomplish. One way to do that would be to have our refresh service be driven by somebody else. So if you think about it, in our update service, which I really don't like anymore, this is not a very nice piece of code. Like new thread, run, try, while. I mean, I don't know about you, but I really don't like that. I think this is way more elegant piece of code. I really like this piece of code. It's like, heck, 30 lines fits on one screen in large font, right? Much more legible, right? Plus, keep in mind that we really didn't need this nor this, right? Because we don't really do anything. I mean, how elegant is this now, right? It's a nice little piece of code. Just does the job. Bam, goes and pulls it from tweets. Okay. The problem that we had was somebody needs to trigger this. So right now, the trigger is going to be either, if you look at the picture, the trigger right now is going to be either us pressing the button. So you press the button and you say, start the refresh service, right? So the human, or, well, that was the only trigger actually, us pressing that button. What if there was something else out there called alarm service that could also do that? Think of it as a cron job. You guys know what a cron job is? So something like that, right? Where you can basically subscribe and say every X, intervals, like do something. So that's what an alarm service is. Now, alarm service is also going to introduce to other system services. So just to really quickly bring it up, AlarmManager. So alarm service is exposed to us via something called an AlarmManager. And that's pretty standard. So basically what you have is you get the AlarmManager, and your API is pretty simple. It's going to say set, right? Set something, right? So schedule an alarm. Okay? And that's about it. That's, or set, this is the one that we're going to want to do. Set inexact repeating, right? So that's the kind of thing that we want. So set inexact repeating. So that's gonna basically schedule repeating inexact interval and alarm that repeats every hour, but not necessarily at the top of every hour, right? Right. So that sounds like what we want. So to do this, let's what's a good what would be a good place for us to register this alarm manager? Like we gotta somewhere set up the alarm, like to say, hey, this is what we want to be done. Every so often, do something. What's a good place to do that? Huh? Boot receiver, yes, because boot receiver is guaranteed to run first time around the system boots up. So we could actually use it to set some stuff up, right? Um, so as opposed to, like, let me open up my boot receiver. So as opposed to having boot receiver start the the update service. So first of all, I'm gonna change it from update. Well, I don't even. For now, I'm gonna comment this out. I really want to get rid of update service, right? So what would be nice to do here is set up the alarm, right? So system. Let me give you a picture about a couple of things before that are not necessarily from this course. They're from another course, but just to kind of explain something to you. So, of course, we're Android out. Yeah. This is what happens with your system when you boot it up. When you press the power button on your computer, on your Android device, right? So what happens is we start some Linux daemons, bam, and then what we do is we start some Linux runtime stuff, and then we start this thing called Zygote, which is the beginning of life for all the apps. But then even before we finish booting, so this is the line where we do boot complete, right? Even before we finish booting, we start a whole bunch of system services, right? So in Android, there are a whole bunch of system services, and they're part of this picture that we had earlier that we talked about. So they all run inside of this in here. So this is not just libraries, which we've been using so far, but it's also a bunch of services, things that are actually running, right, active. And you can attach to these services. Like think about GPS, right? Think about sensors. Think about Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, telephony, audio, NFC, etc., etc. These are all services that you can connect to and say, I would like to know when sensor changes. I would like to know when GPS becomes available. I would like to know when phone is off hook. I would like to know when Bluetooth is paired, etc., etc., right? So these are various services with their various APIs. I think the last count is like there are like 57 of them or something in Ice Cream Sandwich. So there's a whole bunch of these different things. There's certain things that are common for all of them. There's certain things that are different. So we'll use Alarm Manager as an example. What's very common for all of them is to get it via the context. So Alarm Manager is going to be Alarm Manager, and then to get it, you ask the context for it. Get system service, and then you ask for context dot alarm service. So you're gonna have a. This is not compiling. At cast alarm manager. So this line of code you're gonna have every single time. You're gonna get system service, right? Now, once you get the system service, things become different. In the case of Alarm Manager, you then refer to its API, and its API is rather short, right? It's got these things, and it's pretty obvious. Like the one we want is going to be set in exact repeating. So now I can say things like Alarm Manager dot set in exact repeating. And this is now where we gotta kind of also see what things mean. So if I click on inexact repeating, so type is elapsed time, real time, RTC, or RTC wake up. Right? And these things mean different things. Then you have a typo there. So if you look at what elapsed time, so alarm time in elapsed real time since boot, including sleep, right? Alarm time including sleep, which will wake up the device when it goes off. Alarm things, okay, alarm time in. So it doesn't really matter for us in this case. We don't want to. We do not want to wake the device up. You can also, there are a couple of ways to do this with alarm service. The real question is, do you care about these updates running while the device is turned off? In other words, my device is now not awake, right? All its drivers are shut down, and so on. The only driver that is awake is actually the radio driver, right? So the phone call can wake it up. But right now this device is sleeping. Sometimes you need to keep the device awake. And to do that, that's beside the point, but you gotta obtain the wake lock. You basically keep it awake. Now that's obviously potentially dangerous thing because it wastes battery and do various things. So you typically do not want to, it depends. Like Google Maps navigation needs that feature because you want navigation to stay on while you're driving, right? But sometimes you do not want that that thing, right? So in this case, I would presume that we don't care about refreshing tweets while the device is sleeping, right? I would not want to do that. So the question is then, are we going to use elapsed time or real time, right? So basically current time in milliseconds. So in other words, if I say 1 hour, it's going to be 1 hour since last time it was woken up. In other words, does the clock count while we are sleeping? That's the real question. And I guess it may. So it really in that case you would use RTC, which is the time. So it's basically the wall clock, right? It's the time in UTC, right? It's current time in milliseconds. Otherwise, you can do elapsed time since boot, including sleep. So you could do since boot. It doesn't. Oh, this is actually also include sleep elapsed time actually since boot. Okay, so it's smaller numbers, so it's presumably an int or something. So it doesn't really matter for us. So I'll say AlarmManager dot elapsed time. Okay. Trigger at time. Trigger time, so the time the alarm should go off first using the approximate clock depending on the alarm time. This is inexact. The alarm will not fire before this time, but there may be a delay of almost an entire alarm interval before the first invocation of the alarm. So in other words, when do you want this alarm to fire, right? And for the first time, knowing that the first time could be the next interval. So we could use the current time, right? If we are using, so we could use the current time in milliseconds. So system dot current time in millis. Okay. The next thing is interval. So what's the interval? Is it 15 minutes, half an hour, half day, or day? Right? And we should probably adjust our interval to use that as well, right? Remember how we have that in the preferences. So we could actually grab that from preferences, right? What that interval is. So we call it delay before, right? So we called it, I'll call it interval for now, but we'll have to define that interval. And let's say we're gonna get interval here. I'll say, is it it's a constant, right? Is it a constant? It is a constant. So let's see what the actual values of constant are. So then actually number of milliseconds, right? Right, so half interval an hour, so that's a 3.6 million milliseconds. So it's time in milliseconds, right? So that's already what we have, right? Times 10. So that's gonna be our, so long interval is gonna be something. We're gonna figure it out, okay? And the only other thing that we have is gonna be the operation. And the operation is gonna be this thing here that that is a pending intent. Now, what the heck is a pending intent, right? So a pending intent is basically an intent that you're leaving for somebody for the future, right? So we're now creating an intent today that we're gonna give somebody to use to wake us up later on in the future, not us or somebody else. Make sense? So we're gonna have this thing called pending intent. Operation, right? Now the question is how to create a pending intent. And a pending intent you create, you don't create directly, but you create it via one of the static methods, depending on what you're doing, right? So remember what you can do with intents. We've been talking about it today extensively in the afternoon, right? So intents, you can use an intent to start a service, start an activity, stop a service, bind the service, send a broadcast. That's about it, right? So remember what we want to do, in what our alarm is going to do is going to wake up our refresh service, right? So so basically what we want to do in that case is we want to do a get service intent, right? So that's the one that we're going to use. So it's going to be a get service intent. So it's going to go something like this: pending intent dot get service, okay? Context, request code, intent, and flags. And keep in mind, you know, part of this exercise is also going to show you how to use the documentation and all that stuff, because you definitely don't want to memorize all this stuff. All right, so context, we got that. Request cost, private code for the sender, currently not used. Okay, so -1 should qualify, right? Right? Intent, don't confuse the intent describing the service to be started. So don't confuse this intent and this intent. This is the intent that walk the broadcast receiver. This is the intent that we're going to be sending, right? So that intent is going to be the actual new intent, right? And then it's going to be from context to refresh service. Did we put does my refresh service actually have the a way to start it via the action? Did we create an action for that? Start my refresh service, please. Yeah, I did, right? What's that? Like I could do it from this to refresh service. I could do it that way, or I could also do it via intent filter. Although this name is kind of stupid, start my refresh service, please. Typically, it would be something like com.example.yamb dot refresh service, right? So now my boot receiver could, yeah, I could do it this way or I could do it that way. It's really up to you, right? And if you want, you could also, to make it a little cleaner, one way to store these statics, we could basically put it in here. So create a public static final string action refresh, right? Would it be action? I guess. It's an intent, action refresh, right? So now I can basically, in my boot receiver, as opposed to hard coding it like this, I can say yamba app dot that. And the only question is, what the heck are flags? And the flags are one shot, no create, flag cancel current, flag update current. Okay, so let's say one shot, it's basically used with get activity, get service, can only be used once. If set after send, it's called on it, it will automatically cancel for you, and any future attempts to send through it will fail. So we probably want update current flag for ball. It's going to already exist, then keep but replace with an extra data. Okay. We probably want, like, if basically in an unlikely situation that one service, one intent is not done, that we have a second one and second one is, so you don't want this refresh to pile up, right? Instead, you can say, oh, if there's already one pending, just update it, right? So I could do something like that. So intent dot update current. It's not intent. It's is it where am I right now? Pending intent. And the only now problem that I have is to get interval, and the interval, to get interval, I need to get the preferences, and we don't have an easy access to Yamba app in this case. So what I can do is I can do preference manager dot get default share preferences for the context dot get string. Is the delay like this, or what was the default? Was 15 minutes is how many milliseconds is that? We put that as a default. I'll just make mine 15. So long. And this is where you get like a little bit of a spaghetti code. So what I'm doing is I'm getting the preference manager. I'm getting that string. Was it called delay? I don't think it's called delay. Let's see in the preferences, whatever we call that preference, delay. It was called delay in lowercase, right? Delay, right? So then my boot receiver is going to be called delay 9000, and then I could yeah, and that's basically that. So just to make sure we know what we got, I'm gonna say in log, I'm gonna actually put some of these debug statements, right? So string.format %s, so delay %s. Actually, I don't need a format. Delay plus. Something like that. So everything basically compiles at this point.
So, check. I missed it. So, the action, can you go to the refresh service? How do you make this pending service available? I mean.
So first of all, so keep in mind, you guys, that nothing changed other than I haven't changed the file other than boot receive. Right? This is the only file we're changing.
Oh,
right?
Now or because the pending intent trying to get the service, right? Pending intent get service. Trying to get operation action refresh.
Yeah, we're creating an intent that's going to happen in the future. So basically, what the pending intent is a wrapper around an intent that specifies, you know, what to do with that intent. So we're saying, create a pending intent around this action for get service. So that's now our operation. Essentially, this is going to be equivalent of start service for such and such intent.
But it says whoever gets this pending intent, obviously this is the same process application, but some other application will have like the same privileges. It says if you I think I understand this. By giving pending intent to another application, you're giving the right to perform operation you have specified.
The permissions are a different story in this case. We're not too concerned about permissions. We can manage permissions like we talked about yesterday with permissions, and we can do that. We can do that here, right? So as a matter of fact, we already have this locked down because the refresh service is already saying you gotta have the permission to refresh, right? And if you want, we can just we can either say we can, what we could do is we could say signature. So basically, only guys who have the same signature can access this. So yes, you can give anybody this intent. Anyone can know this piece of text. This doesn't have to be a secret. This piece of text, refresh service, right? But no, they will not be able to invoke because this permission is going to block it, right? So hello world would not be able to send an intent to start a service. So far good?
And when did you define this permission? Refresh?
It's defined right here. Yeah. So that's that. The only other thing that I would kind of suggest doing was adjusting the strings to match what we have available, right? So right now we have every 15. Minutes, every 30 minutes, and every, no, hold on, what are the intervals? 15, 15 minutes, half day. So every hour, every half hour, 15 minutes, half day. Half day. So so and we are not 50. So every 15 minutes, half an hour, half a day, once a day, right? So then this is becoming milliseconds. So 15 minutes becomes 90,000, right? Yes. Right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So 15 minutes, half hour, right? Every hour, half a day, and every day. So those are the values, right? It doesn't really matter, but I just wanted to kind of sync it with what the constants are. So far I only changed this, right? And again, it's not really that important, but the only new thing was the boot receiver. And so that's about it. Let me try this. So I'm going to install it because it's going to take some time to actually test this, right? So we need to install it to actually have it be part of Yamba first, right? What if I just wanted to fake my, I don't really want to sit here and wait to reboot the emulator. How could I fake my boot receiver to actually get installed, to actually get kick-started? Like I want to write a test code to this. No, because right now my boot receiver is only registered to get the notifications from for this intent filter. Yeah, I mean, I could just make up I could do something like this. Action name, this is a, com example yamba dot test broadcast, right? This is just for me to be able, like, to speed these things up. I don't want to wait, like, install it and, like, go wait for it and all that. So my little hello thingy, remember we had a little button. I'm gonna put in button as opposed to start service. Oops, I'm gonna comment this one out, but instead of that I'll say I'll say send broadcast for a new intent right? So now I'm gonna run my my hello world, which is now really becoming my little almost test driver, right? So let's see if this actually pans out the way we expected. So if I click on this, this should send an intent. But nobody got it. Alright, so let me see. Why is this installed? Run as Android app. Okay, so if I run this, there. So my button did wake up my boot receive, right? So presumably our alarm is now set up. Yeah. See how you can. This is a little bit on a testing side, and set the alarm with 9,000, which was the default. Oops. So you know. What's that? Well, the boot receiver is gonna start the alarm. Oh, you're saying start. Oh, do I need to start the alarm? No, you just set the alarm. Yeah. What? Yeah, yeah. It's a system service. Yeah, it's set for 15 minutes right now, but did it work? So this was just for testing purposes. All I did in the manifest file was add this one extra action filter. So you don't have to have one filter, you could have multiple filters, right? And if I wanted to really test it, presumably I could add a, not in here, but presumably I wanted to, let me see if I can add the preference here, test. Item, test, 30 seconds, item. So we don't have to wait 15 minutes, right? And so this would be 30,000, right? 30,000 milliseconds, right? So if I do this, now if I install my test code, why didn't it actually do a build? That's weird. It actually didn't do the rebuild. Run as Android app. So if I go to menu, preferences, delay, I want to set it for 30 seconds. Okay. And that's it. So now I want to run my hello world again and trigger it. "30 seconds, bam, it worked, right? You can see that this got triggered, and you can tell that refresh ran. So you should see 30 seconds later, refresh once again. Although it's not the official interval, so I don't know if that's, it's something that we should remove eventually. But it's a test. Okay, did. Student Tim is tweeting, right? So this is now running as well, right? So far so good? What's missing in this code? What's not good about this code right now? What's that? There's no way to turn the alarm off. Right, so we could add an interval as opposed to a test interval. We could add an interval never, right? Right, sure. And then we could say item something like that, right? So we could figure something out like that. But here's the thing, what if I now, so this is now running every 30 seconds. What if I now go and change that? It will not change it. It keeps on running every 30 seconds. Right? So what's missing? Oh, there, just ran. What's missing in the boot receiver? What did we have to do before? So we're only doing this code once at boot time, right? And we're testing, we're checking the preference manager for the value, and we're assigning that as an interval, setting up the alarm and dying off. This is never going to start again until the phone is rebooted. Actually, you know what? That's not a bad idea. I mean, you have a... that's not a bad idea. I mean, what I was thinking, there's, it points out there's different ways to do these things. Don't do this, but what I was thinking is I would extract this, right? I would say shared preferences, prefs is that. Then I would, here, then we would do X, we would do prefs dot, right? That's the same code so far, right? Just basically refactor it a little bit. Now, what was missing would be to be able to assign a listener, right? So I could do something like this, prefs dot add, what's the, is that? Register, that's right. And then I could say new, and then it's such a long thing, you copy paste this, right? I would just do an inner class right here. It's a little ugly. but you know, and then I would say organize imports, and then I would say add and implement methods, and then you would basically say prefs arg or key, right? So then in here I could then refresh the alarm. It's a little bit too much code. Preferences changed, right? Like we set the alarm, but user changed his mind or her mind. Now what? So we could register a listener, but we already have a code like this, right? So so we could actually, as opposed to doing all this stuff here, right? We could actually do it in the where we already do that, which is in Yamba app. So we know when preferences changed, right? Preferences changed here. So I could send a broadcast, send broadcast, and again I could make a broadcast new in, I could make a static intent, intent refresh alarm intent is new intent, make up some text, right? I'm just making stuff up. Oops. So I just make some text here. So we now just send broadcast for refresh alarm. So basically when share preferences change, we say refresh alarm. And then we could just do the boot receiver again. Make sense? We can keep waking that piece of code over and over again. Not just at boot. Maybe boot is not the appropriate name anymore. Maybe it should be called, alarm receiver or something. Refresh receiver or something like that. But then in the manifest file, I better register yet another action, Android name, and then use that name that we just defined. What do you mean? Oh, why don't put them in XML string? Because we don't need to localize them. They're not user exposed. This is something that we hard code. Once we get it right, we got it right. There's no real reason to externalize it. It's not something that's configurable and so on. Yeah, that's why. And the only thing that we may have to do is cancel previous. So we may have to do so cancel previous operation if there is one, and then we set a new operation, right? All the this may not work. And we're only going to do this if interval greater than 0. Right, because interval could be 0. So I should be now able to trigger my boot receiver via just those couple of changes in the preferences. Okay, so if I go menu, preferences, delay. Then woke up, did a job, right? And it's gonna run within the next 30 seconds first time around, right?
So you add another intent field to the only refresh service, it's matching on that long refresh intent we created on the Yamba app. And then what if you change in the boot receiver, you are canceling the old intent?
I'm not. I haven't canceled anything yet. See, that also got it. So that worked. So I should presumably cancel it here. So if the interval is 0, well, we should probably cancel. Yeah. So let's see. Alarm. How do we cancel all? It should be. It should cancel. Yeah. So. So AlarmManager dot cancel. So we should probably cancel anything previous, right? Any previous operation. And then if there is a new stuff, we set it and let it run, right? Okay, so let me. Do you guys lost on this, or are you following? So really, the only news is really in this file boot receiver. This is really the only file you care about, right? I mean, there's some other cosmetic stuff that I did, but don't worry about that. So here's what we did. We basically, let me start with the picture. Where's our picture? So what we wanted to do is we wanted to have this guy be controlled by some kind of alarm, something that basically alarm service. So there's going to be alarm service here. It's outside. It's part of the system, and we wanted this alarm. We wanted to have a boot receiver. So let me redraw this. So we have the boot receiver, right? So we wanted the boot receiver to set up alarm. So alarm is something that is outside. So AM, Alarm Manager, right? Alarm is something that's outside of our project. It's part of the system. It's given to us. So boot receiver. So boot receiver wakes up, right? So this is boot completed, right? Boot completed happens. This guy wakes up. It goes and it sets up the Alarm Manager. Think of it as a cron job. It goes and says, all right, I would like to configure such and such job. Okay? Got it so far? Make sense? So once it configures that job is gonna subsequently trigger a refresh service every so often. Right? Now the only additional thing is I also wanted, if there's a change in preferences, I wanted to kind of trigger this guy to set up the job again. Right? So that's the tiny little difference that we did. And that's actually done through here. So this guy notices a change, says boot receiver set update. Basically the alarm manager updates the alarm manager changes the frequency. Yeah, just a second. But you guys conceptually get this first. So this happens first. at boot, right? So this is boot completed intent. This guy wakes up, does this second, right, and sets up the job, and then this happens three plus times, right? This keeps happening many times. This is optionally, if this happens for like something changed, this guy is gonna say, oh, update yourself. Then this is gonna be then 5, and then this is gonna be 6 plus times, right? So it keeps on kind of looping that way. So you conceptually, do lines and circles make sense? We're using intents quite a bit here. And these are the Android building blocks, right?
The share preference can go to AlarmManager directly, right? Without going to the receiver.
What's that?
The share preference, you can go to AlarmManager directly and configure.
Well, you could attach an observer. Yes, you could attach a register an on share preference change listener to listen to that and then go update. Yes, you can do that. But this is a little more elegant. That's what they suggested. So I think it's a little more elegant. Yeah, because we use intents and such, so it's more of a this was how it was designed to be used, right? So then what we do. So back now to code, right? So this is where I read my share preferences just to get the interval, right? So this is all just like get that number, parse that number. It's just nothing special, right? Then once we get this interval, we create a pending intent. Pending intent is just basically wrapping some intent such as start action refresh around some future intent. That's all it is, right? Make sense? Then we say we get the AlarmManager, and then we say if there's anything previously, cancel it, and then we say if the interval is bigger than that, set future interval, and that's it.
I don't understand the cancel. If there is anything previously, cancel it.
Well, if I have a pending intent set every 15 minutes, and user says, I want to change it to half an hour. So in our picture, what's going to happen is we're going to go from here to that AlarmManager, and we're going to say update to half an hour. It says, fine, I'm going to now start at half an hour. So now what we have is we have 15 minutes and half an hour intervals.
But you're passing in the same operations that you created with that pending intent. That's what
That's yeah, you're right. I should have yeah, you're right. I should have remembered the previous one and then use that one instead.
Yeah, that's my question.
So yeah, I should have done that. So yeah, I didn't. But that's what that would do. I would have to have a static variable here and then memorize the previous one and so on. Okay. But you guys get it otherwise, right? Okay. So that's the main thing. The other thing that I did was just more cosmetic stuff, like we said, okay, if Yamba app, if there's a change in preferences, notify the alarm to not send a broadcast to update that. So that's basically restarts this guy again, right? Right. So I guess I could have static pending intent last stop, right? So I could basically cancel last operation, right? And then this becomes operation. We run that operation, and then the once we set that operation, we can basically, last stop becomes the operation, something like that, right? I could, yeah, that's something like that. Any questions on this? Comments on this? How you doing? Lost or so? Got it? Getting it? Getting it? Okay. Yeah. No. What we had going on before, we had the update service, right? Which at this point we totally obsoleted. We can totally get rid of update service, right? So our update service was very rigid. It was basically sleeping here for exact some number of seconds, and it would fire up, right? So if you look at it like this, let me find a clean slate, right? So clean piece of paper. So if you imagine that, so this is our service. Our service had a perfect interval. It would wake up, it would wake up, it would wake up, it would wake up, right? And so on. So each of these wake ups on the radio uses the radio, right? Now the problem is so these are perfect intervals. This is all 15 minutes or whatever. Let's say 15 minutes. The problem is that there's also other stuff that goes on. Like maybe Facebook does something like this, right? Every 15 minutes. Maybe you have your Gmail doing something like this, right? Right? Maybe you have your Twitter app doing something like that, right? So very soon your radio is up all the time, right? We're trying to minimize how often radio is. So we're trying to batch all the needing to go out to the world on the same interval. So it doesn't really, you don't really care about your Gmail going exactly on a specific, second, nor your Twitter, nor your Facebook, nor your any of those. So you can just say, hey, why don't you guys all go together? So we open up the radio once, everyone goes to the cloud, and we shut it down. So the purpose of this whole exercise was to get more of a flat, then everyone goes out, does the job, flat, presumably for some time, everyone goes out, does the job, flat, and so on. So this would presumably minimize the consumption of battery, because the radio is, like I said, it's a hog. It's about 10x normal. Difference is about 10x between idle and on, right? So that's what we're trying to do. That allows by using the system's alarm manager and this elegant system, saying just here's an intent service, just fire up, tell it when to wake up, and so on, right? By using that, we now have the system be responsible to kind of optimize all those things, right? So that was the big goal of this. That makes sense? Other apps can tie themselves to the same alarm. It's not our business, right? So Facebook can do the same thing. They can say, go every 15 minutes and check for Facebook updates. But what every 15 minutes means, you want to get in sync. Like maybe that's 7 seconds after the minute, right? Like you want them all to go out at the same time. It doesn't need to be on the clock 15 minutes. It can be 15 minutes and 7 seconds afterwards, so that we group them all on the same clock. So this way, we would basically have all of them are kind of going out in here, right? Right? And then they're all kind of flat. And they're all going out in here and so on, and then they're kind of flat. And that's what we want to cause. That's our goal. Just merely batching them together. Batching the jobs on the same queue, right? On the same radio is up. Yeah.
Is it that first argument, AlarmManager, FTC, that you passed in second executive meeting, is that what says that the time interval should be relative to 0 minutes and 0 seconds of the hour?
I think it's elapsed is actually 0 minutes 0 seconds. I think I use the RTC or whatever it's called, which is the absolute. Yeah, I use the absolute. So because I use the absolute because I based the start time. I'm not 100% sure, but it seems to have worked. I used here I said start from absolute RTC, absolute time, and use the current time. So we offset based on both are based on January 1st, 1970. So that's why I kind of figured it's going to work, because they're both based on the same unit, imperial time, right? So basically, the point here is that this service, which we had earlier, is totally obsolete. We don't need this. We don't need this like thread within run, within try, within while, within, with the sleep and so on. This was somewhat ugly, right? We separated the job from the scheduling of a job, right? That's a big difference, right? So look, our job now is in a refresh service. So our job is right here, right? Our job couldn't be simpler. Pull and insert. That's the job. All the threading, everything else is done magically there. So this is very elegant piece of code. I mean, come on, 20 lines of code, not even, right? So that's the job. The scheduling of a job was done with, if you take out all the reading the preferences, right? The scheduling of a job is really, that, right? Again, it's not that bad. It's like set an alarm. So we separated concerns as well, right? And through all this process, we got to illustrate some of the sort of advanced topics like pending intents. How also one thing you guys want to learn from this course is also kind of how to think in the way of Android, right? So to kind of use these building blocks like intents, intent filters, services, who's messaging whom, how this gets delivered, and so forth. That's why it's different than just a plain old Java, right? So we kind of got to use some of those features and so on in an elegant way, right? So is it clicking in?
Refresh service in the manifest.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe at this point, boot receiver should not be called boot receiver. Bad name, because before it was just for something to do at boot. Now its responsibility is to schedule refresh. So we might as well rename it. So here I'm gonna actually rename it. So boot receiver is now refactoring name, officially gonna become refresh schedule receiver. Refresh schedule receiver, or refresh alarm receiver. What do you want to call it? Yeah. Okay. Refresh alarm receiver, right? Oh, actually, they fixed this. Magic. You would have to normally manually do this, but how easy was that to rename? There used to be a bug. The refactor would not fix this. So now this refresh schedule receiver is responsible for scheduling refresh service, right? And it responds to a whole bunch of things. It responds to boot. It does something when system boots up. It does something when we do a test broadcast, and it also does something when we change, something in the, And you could also have it do something on a button, right? If you want it to change or reschedule, but we do it from preferences, right? So far, so good. You cannot have two instances of the same app run at the same time. You can have two instances of the same main building block running at the same time. Here's a problem. Actually, no, it's not. I can't demonstrate it. Yeah. All right. So let me. So there's 15 minutes left. let me give you guys something to think about. So you were asking about the sample code and such, right? So there's a very good sample code you should be aware of, and by the way, for this to work, you must have the following installed. You must have this SDK samples for SDK installed, right? So for example, I think I have it, but there's an update, right? So yeah, I do. So you must have one of these for your appropriate platform, okay? So check this out. So what I can do is I can create a new project, Android project, okay? You wanted to create a new project, you wanted to do something different, right? So let's do something different. I'm going to create a new project from scratch in the next 15 minutes, right? But what we're going to do is we're going to create projects from existing sample, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create next, and I'm going to choose API demos. So basically what I did is, again, I clicked on create project from existing samples. You can leave this blank, right? So just create project from existing samples. Next, pick your platform, like I'm working with 4.0. Next, pick your sample, and the one I recommend is API demos, and click on finish. Now there are gazillion different samples, but this one is really good for this one is really good for, it's kind of like a kitchen sink of a whole bunch of stuff, right? You guys there? So let me run it.
This thing is pretty big, right?
Yeah, it's big. Slash FM, blah blah blah. So this is the problem. It already was installed in this brand new emulator, God knows when and where, and it says must be full uninstallation. And it tells you what the command is actually. So I need to uninstall it because it was whatever is there is assigned me the different debug key, probably the one from the factory or whoever made it. So what I need to do is I need to ADB uninstall that altogether, because it's probably already installed on your device, and then I'm gonna reattempt to install it by running it. And this time around, since it's removed now, it's gonna go and be installed with my key. Because the debug key that it was signed with was some engineer somewhere, right, who built it. So we all have different debug keys, hopefully. So do we have it running? There it is. API demos is the kitchen sink of stuff. You know, you can find out about various things. So for example, you wanted to, and let's see. One thing that I'm thinking you could try to figure out on your own is, you know when we post a message, it may take a while. It'd be nice to do a little spinner, like a little progress bar, right? That says, please wait, we are attempting to post a message, so the user knows what's going on. But like, there are gazillion widgets, and we're not going to show you all of them. So you should be able to figure out, like, by going to this list, what the heck would it be, right? Oh, progress bar. Let's see, would that be that? In title bar. Dialogues. Yeah, this would be a good one, right? Something that says, please wait, we're posting a message, right? Or without a title, please wait, we're posting. Yeah? So, you know, if you were gonna figure out how to use this widget, you could go to documentation, good luck. Or you could go into this example. And it's really nicely organized. So see how it says views, progress bar, dialog tree. Well, this is a UI, so it's gonna have some XML, it's gonna have some Java, right? So no problem. We know about Android so far, right? So let's find views. Okay, so something that's called progress bar 3. All right, so it's using a layout called progress bar 3. All right, no problem. Resources, layout, progress bar 3. So between these two files, right, you should be able to figure out how this works. This is probably not that useful. It's probably all it's doing is probably just pulling up the menu. Those are probably just the buttons, so not much in here, just 2 buttons, right? We don't really care about it. So as a matter of fact, I can close this, and so there's some Java. Okay, when the button is clicked, say show dialog. Oops. So it says show dialog, right? And that's how you do it. Okay. Protect the dialog, blah blah blah. So anyway, the point is, try to figure out like something like this, like for example a progress bar that we could plug into our example, right? Yeah. And try to just kind of see what's in this kitchen sink. Anything that you were looking for that would be available to you, right? So that's one of the main sample codes that I wanted to show you because I think it's the best for learning purposes. It's more to the point than anything else, right? Yeah. So play with it for a second. But you guys learning so far? I mean, is this good so far? Okay. I mean, we still have 1 day, so we can like change the gears, right? So if if there's something that's missing or remote services. Well, we've been doing remote services from day one. Twitter. It's a remote service, right? I mean, it is a web service. All along, we've been doing a web service. It's just the intricacy of building up a URL are of no interest to us. That's a plain old Java or Perl or whatever, right? So we abstracted all that. It is a SOAP service. It's all the same stuff. Come on, you guys. Like it's.
Parsing like XML or JSON.
Well, so we can talk about parsing XML. We can talk about JSON, but that's got nothing to do with Android, right? That is a plain old Java. So Twitter does exactly that. We are making a web service. So it's actually a RESTful web service. So yes, there's a RESTful URL going out. There's a JSON or /XML code coming back. There's something parsing it. But guess what? There's nothing about Android and all that. So we can go on that tangent and we'll learn great things about Java. Okay. Yeah, location would be a good one because it is very Android specific. Yeah, location and sensors.
About being able to work with the photographs.
Yes, that's a specialty thing, and I'll give you a code for that. Yeah.
What about the remote view that you mentioned that if you want to make it to run on the launcher?
Yeah, you want to talk about app widgets.
Yeah, app widget. That'd be good.
Okay.
You have the gesture builder to run that.
I don't know much about gesture builder at all, unfortunately. NFC, I don't know much about NFC either. We can explore it, but I don't know a lot about it. Plus, we don't have a very good way to do anything with it.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, there's only one device, and I don't have it that has that.
Makes no sense.
We get a new canvas and graphics.
So canvassing graphics. That I can show you canvassing graphics as part of the sensors. I'll show you the example that compass example that actually does use that, and that's going to explain custom components as well. Google Maps, like so first of all, Google Maps is not a standard Android. It's a Google specific add-on, right? It's kind of like saying show me Kyocera's dual screen support, right? So secondly, it has its own API, right? So in terms of using Google Maps, it's super easy. You just take Maps view and you drop it into your application. And bam, the box that you drop in is just like you drop in a piece of text view, right? But what you do with that box is now different because you now follow Google Maps API, and that's a separate API. We actually have a separate course so that it's not specific to Android. It's the same for web or JavaScript or Android and so on. So, and secondly, I don't have. You have to have a key to use it. We wouldn't really get a lot done. I can show you. I have a sample code. I have a Maps application that I can walk you through really quickly. Yeah, I'll show you. I mean, yeah, that's very well documented. Easy stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, can you drag and drop a button? You can drag and drop a Google Map into your app. I don't know anything. There's nothing special in Android about charts. You can do charting, but that now just becomes some third-party components. Yeah, so that's what that was the same question. So what happens when you have images? You want to display the images of users. There's actually a little bit of work to be done because you get a URL, but you don't want to wait for that URL to download. You gotta put it. You gotta manage the download. Build basically a little download manager. I can show you how that works. I could actually copy paste that code and plug it in. But I didn't know if I want you to follow along just because there's a lot of stuff. But I can explain conceptually how that works, yeah. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. So, yeah, I'll, rock and roll. We'll see you guys tomorrow, same time.